Hello class, welcome to Unit 2 final review. This one is on discrete and continuous functions along with writing domain and range. Discrete functions are sets of values, tables of values, and then graphs of random points. The domain and range of discrete functions, the domain is your x values, the range is y values. You write each separately using set notation. Example would be a set of ordered pairs given here. You would write the domain inside set notation and then the range inside set notation. If you notice here, I put them in numerical order, both the domain and range. Mathematically, it's just good practice. It's not wrong if you don't. Okay, writing the domain and range of discrete functions. Again, example here would be sets of values. The domain are your x values, which is 1 and 3, inside the brackets, inside set notation, and then the range would be the y values inside set notation. Remember, set notation is the squiggly lines here. From a table of values, you would take and write your x, those are your domain. So inside the brackets, you would write -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, and then the range, you would write 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. From a graph of random points, you would look at each point separately and write down the x and y of each point separately. So the domain and range here would take the x values and put them in the domain, and the range values put them with the range. Continuous functions are functions that you can trace without picking up your pencil. Okay, so any straight line, circle, U-shaped graphs, or any curved graphs, these are all continuous functions because there's no break in them. Okay, continuous doesn't mean that it has arrows on the end, it's just there's no break in the graph. Okay, the domain of a continuous function is still the x values, the range is the y values. You write the domain and range separately using interval and inequality notation. X values are written from how far left to how far right, and your y values are written how low to how high. Looking at graph here. So here's a graph of a straight line. So we're going to look at the domain. Okay, you ask yourself how far left. Remember, arrows on the end means infinity. So this would be -infinity. It's less than x. Look at how far right. Again, the arrow on the end means infinity. And then, so that would be less than or equal to positive infinity. Then write that in parentheses, -infinity, comma, infinity with the parentheses. Remember, when you have numbers, you use the closed brackets and the less than or equal to or the greater than or equal to sign. And when you have infinity, you use parentheses and then just the less than or greater than sign. Greater sign, I'm sorry. Remember, infinity, you cannot equal infinity because it just keeps going on and on. So let's look at the same graph and write our range. Alright, so for range, we ask how low, and remember the arrow on the end means infinity, to how high. So this one here would be -infinity is less than y. And then for how high, again, arrow on the end means infinity, so it would be less than positive infinity. You write the interval notation as inside parentheses. Just remember that numbers use brackets and infinity use parentheses. Another example of writing domain with a continuous function. Okay, this is a graph of a circle. So again, for the domain, you say how far left. So in this case, look at the x value. Since it's a number, it's going to be written as -5 is less than or equal to x. Then how far right? This is +5. So it's going to be less than +5. That's your inequality notation. Your interval notation will be written inside brackets. Okay. Get the same example graph for the range. So for the range, how low? So look at the y value. It's -5 is less than or equal to y. And then how high? Be +5. So be less than 5. There's your inequality notation, and your interval notation is written the same way. Just keep in mind that numbers use brackets and the less than or equal to sign, and greater than or equal to, and the infinity uses parentheses and the less than or greater sign. So another example. here on this one. Domain is your x, how far left. I have an arrow on the end, so that means infinity. So I have negative infinity is less than x. To the right, another arrow on the end, so that's going to be less than positive infinity. Inequality notation, interval would be inside parentheses because I have infinity. Let's look at the range. So for range, we look for how low. So look at the y value there, so that would be -3 is less than or equal to. I have the less than or equal to because I have a number. Put y there, and then how high. Again, I have infinity with the arrows on the end, so it's be less than infinity. The interval notation would be a bracket because you have a number -3, infinity with the parentheses. Okay, one last example here for continuous functions. So my domain is how far left. So I definitely don't have an arrow. I have a starting point there, so that would be -2 is less than or equal to x. And then the how far right, I have an arrow on the end, so it would be less than positive infinity. My interval notation would be bracket -2, infinity. We do the same thing for the range. How low? So I look at the y value there because there's no arrow, so that is a +4 is less than or equal to y. And look at how high. I have an arrow on the end, so it'd be less than positive infinity. And then your interval would be bracket 4, infinity with the parentheses. Alright, stop right here, pause the video, do your domain and range review worksheet. When you're finished with that worksheet, press play and check your answers. Here are the domain and range review answers. Check them. If you have any questions, ask your teachers. Otherwise, proceed to the next video.